One of the most common suggestions to make a video about, and one of the most common questions on Q&As that I get, is what is the most horrific case I've ever heard of? It's a case that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of.
I know, I was
by
going to say,
now,
how can you put
but
out
I'm not
one?
sure if you've ever heard about it in complete
That's what it looks like, yeah, I don't know.
Looked like it was some sort of toxic
did.
waste. Something.
Or it looked like it was like a barrel of sand or something almost. I mean, it could have been toxic waste.
This is the story of Junko Furuta, widely considered to be one of the worst crimes ever committed in human history. So for the love of God, please don't watch this if you're sensitive to extreme violence, especially of the sexual variety.
Oh my gosh.
Man.
Trust me.
That
I
makes
feel
it
like
even
I
worse.
haven't heard
Junko
of this one.
Furuta was a young woman who was born in Misato in the Saitama prefecture of Japan. Her family consisted of a mother, father, an older brother, and a younger brother. She attended high school at a school in Saitama
So
while
she had a
working
normal
part-time at
childhood.
a plastic molding factory after school. She was saving up for a big graduation trip she was planning. She was all set up to start working at an electronics store after she graduated. She was fairly popular and well-liked by her classmates. She had great grades and was hardly ever absent. She was active, attractive, and attracted a lot of attention, which made some people jealous. She didn't drink, didn't smoke, and definitely never touched any drugs. This made her seem very lame in the eyes of the thugs around the school, the Yakuza wannabes. One of the boys in this group was named Hiroshi Miyano. He actually developed a bit of a crush on her and wanted to get physical.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
He proposed this and she
Probably?
refused. Hiroshi was a pretty big bully in this school, one of the only ones actually involved with the younger members of the Yakuza at the time. Usually, nobody dared defy him. He couldn't believe that Junko actually had the gall to turn him down.
Uh-oh. So basically nobody turns him down?
Yeah, so yeah.
Like he's not used to not getting his way, basically.
Yeah. I mean, he's a bully. I mean, he picks on people and...
They do what he wants.
But like, yeah, he's one of those guys that, you know, he thinks he can get anything he wants.
Yeah.
Oh, you reject me? Okay, I got something for you. That's how this guy probably was.
He sounds like a guy that would be abusive if you were in a relationship with him anyway.
Oh, heck yeah. He's definitely probably the type of guy.
For sure.
Did not take this well at all. He couldn't believe that anyone would ever reject him.
Oh, jeez.
He took it as a complete and total insult. He got together with a few of his wannabe Yakuza buddies and they all hatched a plan to get revenge on Junko. They would get another one of their friends to attack Junko, and then Hiroshi would come to the rescue. After he won a bit of her trust, they could take her wherever they wanted.
So he's going to play like
So
he's the good guy.
Right, so that's going to make her want him?
Junko was riding her bike home from her part-time job when an unknown boy attacked her and knocked her off of her bike.
Oh my gosh. This
The boy
is horrible.
who liked her, Hiroshi Miyano, was conveniently across the street while the whole thing happened. He came to Junko's aid and scared off the random boy. He then offered to escort her home. Everything seemed to be going as planned. While Junko didn't actually trust him, it seemed better than the alternative of possibly being attacked again. She didn't have any idea that Hiroshi harbored any sort of hatred towards her.
Oh, no.
She wouldn't have imagined that he would be planning anything like this.
I mean, yeah. I mean, while she playing, I mean, she got attacked by a couple of people. He comes to her rescue and saves her. So she's not going to think like, okay.
Right, you're not going to think that he's actually playing something bad. You're probably like, all right, okay, thanks for helping.
The plan he did was horrible anyway. It's like,
yeah,
bro,
it's all dumb in my mind.
I guess he think like, oh, she's going to fall for me. I saved her life.
I don't know what he's thinking. That or he's just doing this to, like, get what he wants. That's what it sounds like. Because he's taking her home. So this is what has me worried.
Yeah.
Hiroshi took Junko into an abandoned warehouse and revealed his Yakuza connections to her.
Told you.
He then took his time raping her over and over.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Then he took her to a hotel.
What?
In the hotel, he called his friends, Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe. From then on, he and his 3 friends took turns assaulting her.
Gosh.
Unfortunately, this was not their first time doing this.
And they was all like,
as they had just
seniors
recently
in high
done it
school.
to another girl.
Comparable.
Somewhere
So, like,
in there,
America,
yeah.
seniors.
That's what it sounded like.
They decided that they were having far too much fun to just set her free again.
Oh my gosh.
There was also the possibility that she would call the cops and tell them what happened, and they couldn't have that.
So you're going to pretty much keep her
The
hostage.
next morning, Hiroshi took Junko to a nearby park, where Joe, Yasushi, and a 4th boy, Nobuharu Minato, were waiting.
Okay, what I don't get, did they do this in broad daylight? Or did they do it?
I don't know.
I mean, what? Because they did it in broad daylight. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure they had to run across a couple of people. You know, why she just didn't like kind of scream it out.
That's what I'm saying.
Or unless
like,
they shoved her in a car or something like
he
that.
took her to a park, but is that what they're doing it at the park? Or, is it just, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good
It's
question.
kinda
Because
been at
that
night.
seems like that'd be way too obvious.
Learned Junko's address and used it to threaten her, telling her that they would kill
dang.
her entire family
There
if
we
she
go with
tried
that.
to get
People always
away.
like to use
Right? It works, though. That's why they use
The
it.
4 teenage boys then took her back to Minato's parents' home where they continued to assault her.
Jesus.
This is
That's his
where,
parents'
for
home.
Right.
42 more
Where's parents'
days, she would be held prisoner.
42 days.
Oh my god.
On
Plus
the third
that,
day
'cause
that
that's not
Junko
including
was
the first
missing,
day
her
or two.
parents were dealing with the police, trying to get
So,
her
like, a
found.
month and almost 2 weeks.
Knowing this would happen, the captors made her call her parents and tell them that she had run away and was staying with a friend,
Somebody
safe
tells
and
me they're not going to
sound.
believe it, though.
No.
She was forced to ask her
If
mom
she's a
to
good
stop
girl,
the
make good grades,
investigation.
and
They held Junko captive in the bedroom, forcing her to pose as one of the boys' girlfriend. It didn't take long for the parents to realize that this was a lie.
I was going to
Eventually,
say.
they dropped
They
the
know the
whole
suspect.
girlfriend act altogether, as it was very clear that they weren't going to get in any trouble.
What?
Immediately after arriving
the
at the
parents
home, the
didn't
boys
care?
forced Junko into becoming their
what
toy.
the heck?
They beat her relentlessly and raped her countless times a day, often
my
taking
God.
turns. They were proud of
I
what they were
cannot
doing,
imagine.
regularly boasting to their friends that they had a woman
These guys
trapped
must be
and
dead
ready
because
for
they
their
got that
personal
Gillette mark
use.
across
They
their
invited
eyes
a
out.
load
Well,
of
I
their friends
think
to
that's
come
more of
over
just
and
trying to,
have
like,
their way with
Oh,
her.
hot
Not-
eyes.
In the first few days, at least 30 of them raped her, and at least 100 knew of her imprisonment. Even
say
women were
30?
invited to come see the spectacle, with a young girl even being invited to come over and see the prisoner, who then
Ew.
took a pen and doodled on her face. By the day 7 mark, Junko had been already completely stripped of all of her humanity. She was forced to be naked at all times and was
It's like they try to
constantly
mentally
beaten
break
and
them down.
humiliated.
Gosh,
They would shove her
yeah.
into the freezer for hours when they were bored with her,
Freezer?
What?
only pulling her out when they wanted to assault her again.
I can't believe she
Oh,
didn't die
okay.
then.
Nobuharu
Yeah.
In a
Minato's
freezer,
brother
you
and
would die of
parents were living in
hypothermia.
the same house that she was being held in. His brother did nothing,
Unless
aside
it
from
wasn't
informing
plugged up
him that
properly. They
Junko
just
might
put it in the
die.
freezer, but it
Maybe.
wasn't
I see what you're
plugged.
saying, yeah.
His parents were afraid to intervene as they had seen Nobuharu's violent nature firsthand.
So the parents.
That's what I said.
Are
They said
afraid-
the parents knew about
Oh
it.
my god.
And they didn't
These
intervene.
parents are trash. They failed that young man.
They did because,
Bad.
like, the fact that they're that afraid of their own son, like,
Yeah.
then you should have done something
They
beforehand.
called the cops. Why didn't they call the
Right.
cops?
Oh my lord.
Yeah, they could have
This
called the
is-
cops, but they probably didn't want to because
It says they were
that's still
afraid
their.
of him.
Well, yeah, but
And
it's
if
probably
he's
like that's
part of
still their
this,
baby,
like,
probably type
gang, then they're
situation.
probably afraid that, like, the retaliation that they would get. But still,
Yeah,
that is not
This
okay.
kid's a high schooler, isn't he? So it's like
I thought so. Yeah.
Also
Parents
knew of his
failed.
association with the Yakuza and feared
See?
of their possible retaliation.
Yeah,
And
you're
most disgustingly, they worried about losing their good reputation in the community.
Of course.
After about 10 days of this torture, Junko's
I'm
body
sure a lot
was
of people know
already
about
starting
that,
to fail
though he's
her
like a bad kid
because of
probably.
the
Yeah.
ongoing, endless beatings. So much blood had accumulated in her sinuses that she could no longer
Ew.
breathe through her nose.
Oh,
Her
gosh.
digestive system was also beginning to refuse food and water.
Oh no.
If she attempted to eat or drink anything, she would instantly vomit.
Damn.
This also led to severe dehydration.
Yeah, I was
Anytime
gonna
she would
say.
vomit, her
That's
attackers
true.
would get angry
If you're
and
getting
beat
any
her
water,
even
you're not going to
further.
last long at
No.
all.
A vicious cycle that
Like
had
what,
no end in sight.
3 to 6
days?
days?
When the nights got
Maybe.
even colder, she was forced to sleep on the balcony of the home in extreme cold temperatures, sometimes near or below freezing. Eventually, one of the men that the attackers would invite over to the house to see Junko would go on to tell someone else about her, his brother. This brother of his ended up informing the police about what was going on at the
Oh,
Minato
okay, so
house.
somebody finally
2
informed-
officers were soon
Yeah.
dispatched to go check things out. Minato's parents came to the door. When
Please
the
tell me they
police
don't find
explained the
anything.
situation, the parents simply responded that there was no girl in the house.
no.
The police took it at face value,
They didn't
thanked
search.
them, and
Nope.
left,
Oh my
without
gosh.
ever bothering to check even a single detail.
I was afraid that was going to be the case too.
After 20 days of torture, Junko was rendered completely unable to walk.
I can't
She
believe
had
she's
had
made it
lighter
this
fluid
long,
poured on
honestly.
her
Yeah.
legs and set on fire, leaving her with severe burns.
What?
They
Her
said,
legs had also been targeted so severely during the beatings that they were left with severe muscle damage.
Oh my
She was
God.
unable to grip
Oh, because
anything
she
with her
rejected
hands
them, right?
anymore, as they had been smashed with dumbbells
Oh
to
my-
the point where her bones were crushed and her fingernails
Whoa.
were shattered.
Ow.
Some nights later, the attackers got
So
more rowdy than
painful.
This
usual
guy's
and ended
sadistic
up
now.
drinking too much.
the whole
Junko
group.
took this as a chance to try to escape.
No way.
She
How can
crawled
she
down the
escape?
stairs from the bedroom and reached the phone downstairs. She picked up the phone and began to call the police.
Oh no.
The phone rang, and an officer picked up. Just as she was about to speak, Hiroshi came up behind her and grabbed the phone from her hands. He put the
Oh,
receiver to
gosh.
his ear and said, "I dialed by mistake," hanging up the phone.
Yeah,
She was
they
then
really gonna
pulled
punish
back
her.
into the bedroom.
Now, I was gonna say, now
She
she's
was
gonna
in
get a
complete
worse
terror,
beating,
as she would
probably.
obviously be severely punished for this.
Yeah.
And she was correct. They punished her by holding her down and taunting her by waving a candle's flame all around her. Then they covered her entire body, mainly her legs, in lighter fluid and set her on fire once
my
more.
gosh.
Afterwards, she started convulsing. The boys told everyone that she was faking it and set her on fire once again,
Faking
only
it?
to put it out shortly after.
I see. How is she not died yet? I
Somehow,
don't
she
understand.
survived.
Yeah, that's what I'm
From
saying.
this point on, she began begging her captors to just kill her and be
Yeah,
done
she
with
probably
it.
That's what I'm
wanted to be-
saying. Just
They
get
wouldn't
it over
grant
with.
her that
God.
favor.
Yeah.
After being set on fire, they discovered a new way to torture her. The boys would hold her head against the concrete while the others would jump on it. One can only imagine what kind of pain and damage this would have caused.
Yeah, I would have thought that would
After
almost
about
kill you
30
instantly,
days,
like,
Junko
quick.
was no longer able to urinate properly.
Damn,
She had
can't
suffered
urinate
severe
properly.
damage to her genitals after they had been burned with cigarette lighters.
Oh
She also had various foreign objects inserted into her, many sharp and jagged. Even fireworks had been inserted into
Oh
her.
my gosh.
The fireworks were not limited to only one orifice, as they were also inserted into her anus, mouth, and ears
What?
as well.
Ears?
She was
That
left
would be
with
so
eardrum
incredibly
damage
painful.
so
Anus.
severe that she was nearly deaf at this point. Her hands and feet were so damaged that she could hardly move. At best, she could crawl. It took her over an hour to crawl to the bathroom. A later report showed that her brain size was greatly reduced by this point in time.
I was gonna.
Due
yeah.
to her
So
hellish
brain
appearance,
cry,
the boys
yes?
no longer found her attractive.
Well, how's that possible?
Well, yeah,
though?
you just
They used
literally
the same
beat the crap
strategy
out of her.
again to abduct and gang rape another 19-year-old
Are you
woman while she was on
serious?
her way home from work.
So now they like literally carried this over into somebody else.
During
boys
these
are
44 days
horrible.
of hell, Junko Furuta was forced to withstand the most unspeakable torture and suffering that a person can imagine. Some of what was done to her includes being raped many times every single day, day and night, in all orifices.
gosh.
More than 100 men are believed to have
100
raped her by
100?
hand.
men.
Sometimes she was raped by up to 12 different attackers in a single day.
How did
my
you turn from like one
God.
guy to 100
I
men?
don't understand.
She was forced to be left naked most of the time. Many of the men who raped her also urinated on her.
What?
She was forced to pleasure herself in front of the attackers for their entertainment.
Oh my gosh.
She was beaten physically every day. She was beaten with golf clubs, iron rods, bamboo sticks, and various other objects. She had dumbbells dropped all over her body and her head stomped against the ground,
Yeah,
face
she's
first.
pretty much not going to be able. she's
No,
not gonna
there's no
function.
way
She
you
had hot
survive
wax
all
poured
this.
all over her face with a focus on her eyelids. Her eyelids were also burned with cigarettes and cigarette lighters. She was violated with a long list of various objects shoved into all orifices, including but not limited
Oh
to
my gosh.
bottles, both broken and unbroken, iron bars, scissors, roasting needles,
Oh my
chicken
gosh.
skewers,
Chicken
and
skewers?
more. She was given only the
All
strict
these men that came by and just took turns on her, you would think like they would have been like, "No, I'm good." They
Right,
see
like
she's
why?
bruised,
Exactly.
bruised.
Yeah, like when you see
You know, she
someone
got
in
wax
this
on
bad
her
of shape,
face. She's broken bone, and they still
it's scary
We're
to me
all
that there's this many men out there that would like
they just as sick as him.
enjoy that. I
Yeah.
guess what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's disgusting.
bare minimum of food and water. At times, she was forced to eat cockroaches and drink urine.
Ugh.
She had fireworks put into all of her orifices, leaving damage and severe burns. She had her left nipple ripped off by a pair
Oh my
of
gosh.
pliers.
Ah.
She would
Yeah.
be tied up flat on the floor and had dumbbells dropped all over her body.
Oh my gosh.
The drops on her abdomen were so hard that it caused her to lose all control of her bowels.
Yeah,
I mean, we think that would cause internal
She was hung
bleeding.
from the
Yeah.
ceiling and used as a punching bag. She was shoved into a freezer and kept there for hours at a time. Her eyelids were burned with hot wax and lighters when she closed her eyes in fear.
Oh my gosh.
Her breasts were stabbed with sewing needles, the needles often being left inside.
Oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Her genitals were burned with cigarettes and lighters. She had a
This is
hot
really
lit
gruesome.
light bulb inserted into her vagina and moved around until it shattered.
Ew. That would be
By
so
the end, she looked like
painful.
a completely different person after all of the damage.
Well, yeah, how could you not?
It was hard
Yeah.
to even make
Like I
out
said,
her facial
Yeah,
features.
she'll never be the same again. Even if she,
No,
if
Her
she
even if
body
she
survived
was
survived,
it,
severely
yeah.
she'll never be the
damaged
same
and
again.
crippled, and she smelled as if she were already rotting. She was continuously heavily bleeding from her genitals from all of the abuse.
Well, yeah.
She wheezed heavily, struggling to breathe from all of the blood accumulated in her sinuses. On day 40, January 1st, Junko woke up
What
to
year
New
is
Year's
this?
Day alone.
I don't
She
remember what
spent the
year he
day
said.
begging to be killed, completely unable to move. 3 days later, on the fateful day of the 4th of January, the boys challenged Junko to a game of Mahjong Solitaire and forced her to play.
What?
Somehow,
Oh,
even
yeah,
in her
she's able to
condition,
play.
she won the
Mm-hmm.
game. This infuriated her captors, who treated her to a severe beating with an iron barbell, and then poured lighter fluid all over her arms, her legs, her stomach, and finally her face,
Oh my
dumping lighter
gosh.
fluid even into her eyes.
Oh,
Then they put a candle to her face, igniting it all.
no way.
She weakly attempted to put out the flames, but didn't have the strength to do
Yeah,
so.
no way. She's gonna die on
This final torture lasted
Yep.
for a grueling 2 hours altogether.
2 hours?
Already
I don't understand
had
how it
been
would
in a
take that
horrible
long for
condition,
her to,
Junko
Yeah.
went into shock and finally died the following day.
Oh my gosh. How do they plan to hide this? Like, this is
Minato's
gonna be
brother
so
called him
obvious.
within 24 hours to inform him that Junko had died. The boys all rushed over to the house in a panic. Fearing what would certainly be a
What
life
did you
sentence or even a
expect?
death sentence, the boys started to freak out. But they came up with a plan. The captors then put her body into a 55-gallon oil drum and filled it to the brim with concrete.
So
A
those
small bit
concrete-
of Junko's
that's why
long
you were
hair was
saying that's
poking
her
out the
hair.
top of the
Yeah.
concrete, something they apparently didn't notice. They
How could you
disposed
not
of the
notice
barrel
that?
at
Yeah.
a
I guess
construction
maybe it
site
was
in
just a tiny
Koto,
bit.
Tokyo. Seeing that place now, you'd never imagine something like this was buried there.
Jesus.
There was originally a good chance that the police would never find out who did this. There weren't any clues to go on.
Yeah, this girl would just go
Luckily,
missing,
Hiroshi is a
basically.
moron. While he was being questioned by the police 2 weeks later involving their recent gang rape of the unrelated
other
19-year-old
one?
woman, he got confused and thought the police were talking about Junko.
Are you
as the
kidding
cases
me?
were so similar.
They
And
slipped
thinking
up.
that one of the other boys
Yeah.
must have already confessed, he spilled the beans.
Oh,
He realized his mistake, but it was already too late, and he told the police where they had hid the body. Joe Ogura had already been arrested for another unrelated sexual assault case.
jeez
He was
Louise.
quickly
And
also
my mail was
arrested
out.
for
Clearly,
Junko's
these
case
guys
as well.
have. No, I'm saying
The other boys
they were
were
saying
then
he's already
arrested
arrested
Oh,
before
yeah,
they.
yeah,
days.
something else.
Later, the drum was finally opened and the concrete was broke open, revealing Junko's long-deceased body in a nightmare-inducing, horrific condition. Junko's family was notified and told of what happened to her in detail. When her mother heard the details of what was done to her, she fainted.
Yeah.
She ended up in a long-term stay in a psychiatric hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
An
I'm
autopsy
sure,
was
like,
Poor
performed on
family.
Junko, revealing the true horror of what had happened to her. Small bottles were found still stuck in her rectal cavity,
Oh.
and it was revealed that she was pregnant, although the damage to her
Yeah, I was
uterus
wondering,
How
like-
is that even possible after all that
Her
damage?
face
though?
was so
But
completely
still, I
mutilated that she
kind of
Yeah.
had to be
wonder,
identified by her
did somebody get her pregnant?
fingerprints.
Possibly.
Being that they were
I've been
juveniles,
thinking about this. How many times she probably could have got pregnant, but she probably had miscarriage.
Well, that's true too. I
Miscarriage.
mean, when they're beating her that much, I can't believe that her body was in any condition to be able to it happen at that point. though.
Yeah,
That's what
I
I'm
mean, they
saying.
said like over 100 men came.
Yeah, I
and,
know, but still.
captors. But journalists from Shukan Bunshin magazine were able to find out exactly who they were and publish the names of all of them,
Dang, go
stating
them.
that they were inhuman and therefore
Yeah.
didn't deserve human rights. Nobody really contested this. As we know,
I mean,
they
everyone
were
still deserves human
Hiroshi
rights.
Miyano,
What they did was
18 at the time.
insane.
He was 18.
Joe Ogura, also 18 at the
So pretty much
time.
all of them.
Nobuharu Minato, who was
16
16 at the time. And
Dang.
Yasushi Watanabe, who was
16,
17.
18.
Oh my gosh.
All 4 of these monsters were caught and sent to trial. During each trial, it was pretty common for onlookers to pass out upon hearing the details
Yeah.
of the case. Even with all that they had done, they didn't really show any semblance of
Oh my
remorse.
gosh.
And despite all of this, they received extremely light sentences for
What?
such
Are you kidding
horrific
me?
crimes. They were actually
Maybe
still
because they were
being tried as
juveniles?
juveniles, but after much
That's
backlash,
why.
they were changed to.
But, well, I know the laws are different in other countries and stuff like that. But, like,
The
one,
2
two of
kids
them were
were 18, right?
So
I
maybe
know.
they still consider minors,
I don't know. It's a good
you
question.
know, in that
This
country.
is
Versus
Japan,
over here, you're 18, you
so-
consider an adult.
Yeah.
But
But still, even, yeah. In this country, if this heinous of a crime, they would probably try you as an adult when you're that close to 18.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Certain states will. I don't think all states do it.
Right. But when you're 17 already, like, for sure,
But
they
they still
probably
consider you
are.
a minor.
Still, after being upgraded to adult status, they received unbelievably light
They was
sentences.
upgraded to adult status.
Yeah.
Something
see-
that, to this day, continues to enrage people who hear
Yeah,
about
I
this
don't
case.
blame people for being upset about that one. Because they did
The
some
boys
heinous
somehow
things.
were not charged with murder.
What?
Instead, they received a charge called causing bodily injury resulting in death.
Huh?
In Japan, the juvenile court system is far more focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment.
I understand. I understand.
Which I
it.
appreciate that.
I understand. We should try to
But-
rehabilitate people.
Yeah.
But, man, they should have got more time than that.
Exactly. I mean, I
3 years.
appreciate the rehabilitation 100%, but
Yeah.
in a situation like this, when they're doing this detrimental of stuff, they clearly have bigger issues.
Yeah.
But
Remember if you saw my Yukio Yamaji video. Usually this means that juveniles will end up getting relatively very low sentences. Hiroshi was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
I mean, that's
20.
not super
Minato
low.
got
No.
a 5 to 7 year sentence himself.
5 to 7? Is that what they
Watanabe
said?
got
Yeah.
9 years, and Joe got an 8-year sentence.
Jeez.
One sad thing is that these monsters actually received even lower sentences than that at first. They were only increased to the still low amount after an appeal. It was so low that some people even questioned if their Yakuza ties were to blame for this.
Dang.
So
yeah,
yeah,
that
ties,
makes you
yeah.
By the
wonder.
time of this recording, every single one of the 4 boys is out of jail and living free. 3
my
of them were in
gosh.
jail for less than 8 years.
Damn.
Hiroshi, the ringleader, was sentenced to 17 years originally. He tried to appeal, but as kind of a fuck you, the judge actually upped his case to 20 years.
That is
Damn.
kind of
The
funny,
same
actually.
thing happened to 2 of the other boys, and after seeing enough, the 4th boy decided not to try to
Not to
appeal.
try, just keep it
However,
as
they
it
all
is,
ended up
Yeah.
getting out long before those sentences
Oh
were
my
actually
gosh,
up.
that sucks.
And I bet you're wondering if they continued to commit
Yeah, I was
crimes
gonna
after
say,
they got out
what
of
are
jail.
they doing now?
Well, let's see.
Uh-oh.
After Nobuhara Minato got out of jail, he changed his first name to Shinji. He did this for obvious reasons.
Yeah, he.
In
well,
2006,
yeah,
he got married to a woman from Romania and had a daughter together. They soon divorced, and the wife ended up with custody of the child.
I wonder, did she find out about it?
That's a good question. I also wonder if you
Or
abused her.
did he move to Romania? Because there's no way, like, his wife,
see what you're
she lived in Japan.
You'd think you would
And-
know what they look
yeah,
like.
she would know their story. Because,
I mean,
like,
but they change. People change.
Yeah,
like,
people do change.
Like they're like what they look like when they age like that. So it could be that he.
oh, I thought you were
different.
talking about change as a human being.
Well, no, I mean
Yeah.
both basically. But I'm saying like even if you knew what he looked like when he went in, he could look different.
Well, yeah, he was,
as
he
he
was,
got
he was
older,
young.
and he
yeah,
changed
yeah,
his
he was
first
young.
name.
Yeah, if
So-
you grow a beard, grow your hair out,
Yeah,
and stuff like
exactly.
that, change your identity,
Yeah.
move over to Romania, then yeah, nobody would know.
Hard to say.
You know,
Yeah.
Stay away from murder for too long. He
Uh-oh.
was eventually arrested again for the attempted murder of a businessman together. They soon divorced, and the wife ended up with custody of the child. Minato couldn't stay away from murder for too long. He was eventually arrested again for the attempted murder of a businessman.
Oh,
Oh jeez.
The man had noticed Minato staring at him, to which he asked, "What are you looking at?" Minato came over and punched the man. The man then got out of his car and a fight ensued. It escalated to the point that Minato took out a baton and beat him severely.
Oh my gosh.
As the victim tried to get back into his car, Minato slashed his neck with a knife he had hidden. The police were called at some point and they rushed to aid the victim.
Oh my,
In the chaos, Minato escaped.
Yeah.
He was soon caught and arrested. He denied attempted murder, saying he only intended to beat the man. The case is ongoing. Joe Ogura was released in August of 1999. He also ended up changing his name to Joe Kamisaku.
Early 90s, probably?
He actually had the gall to brag about his role in the kidnap and torture.
Brag about it.
His father had vowed to give their entire life savings to
clearly
Junko's
he didn't
family out
care.
of shame.
Oh, that was
But
nice.
Joe ended up taking this money and used himself to live a fairly extravagant lifestyle. Joe's mother wasn't much better, as she actually vandalized Junko's grave, saying that it was Junko who ruined her son's life.
Oh
Joe
my
actually
God.
managed to find some women to date
She's one of
him.
those
That just
like
sounds like
He ended up
people like my
marrying a
baby can do
Chinese
no
woman,
wrong.
but the marriage didn't last too long. Afterwards, he started dating another woman. He went back to prison in July 2004 for 7 years for beating a guy he thought was luring his girlfriend away from him. He had kidnapped and beaten the man for 4 hours.
Oh my
He proudly
gosh.
told the
So
victim
this
that he
this
had
is
killed
MO. Just capture somebody.
Well, right. It
beat
seems
them
like
down.
basically they've learned to just beat people when they don't like them or don't get what they want.
Yeah, pretty much.
killed before and would do it again. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But in 2009, he was once again free, and he is still free to this day. The ringleader, Hiroshi Miyano, went right back into his previous gang activity immediately after being released from
Of course
prison.
he did.
He was arrested for fraud at some point after this, but didn't see jail time for it.
Oh my
Right now, it seems that he's living a fairly normal life. Some might even say a good life. He is a regular patron at a local kickboxing gym and appears to have a normal social life.
Interesting.
Yeah,
As
it
of
is.
now, Yasushi Watanabe is the only one of the 4 boys who hasn't been arrested since. Because of that, it's not really known what he's been up
Like
to.
where he is or what he's up to.
Since the
Maybe he's
investigation
actually
first
changed,
started,
you
the
know.
police have
probably.
been able to get DNA from the sperm and pubic hairs found in evidence to link several more criminals to the crime,
Dang.
including 2 men named Koichi Ihara and Tetsuo Nakamura, both of whom were arrested, and there are probably many others who have not been revealed to the public.
So they got
It
DNA
is
from
unknown
her,
if
no,
they will
from-
all
Yeah, I
face
guess
any sort
so.
of charges. Time will tell.
These cases are
really,
just
really
sick.
disgusting,
Like
man.
I don't understand. I can't fathom how these people are
It's
so
like-
messed up that they can torture somebody like this
Yeah,
for so long.
it's almost like they mentally try to break these people down.
Well, I mean, they do, but
Yeah.
I just don't understand how. I don't know. I
Why
don't
they
get
keep
how you
them
can
for
be
so
so
long?
sadistic to do it
Yeah,
and be like, I don't know, like have the capacity to do it. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
for so
Like,
long and not have no like remorse or nothing.
Nothing.
Alright, let me start off by saying that this is probably a case that you've heard about before. It's very infamous. But this is by far and beyond the case I've been most requested to cover. Since it's requested so often, I decided to dig deep into it as deep as I could and give it the whole in full detail treatment. I think that I'll be able to paint a picture as to how truly horrible it really is, and buckle up because it's disturbing.
Okay, let's see what it's about.
Yeah.
This is the
what-
story of a woman out in Hong Kong named Fan Man Yi. Fan did not have the best life,
Don't think
to
I've heard
say
of
the
this one.
least.
No, me neither.
She was abandoned in her childhood, forcing her to grow up in an orphanage.
Damn.
However, this would only be until
tough
she reached
childhood.
the age of
Yeah.
15, as that orphanage had an age limit in place. Given that she was never adopted and had no place to live, she soon became homeless.
Well, that
Soon
stinks.
after that, she
Yeah.
became
Does not
addicted to
sound like fun.
drugs.
Ugh.
Fan ended up having to resort to prostitution, working at a brothel to get by and even feed herself. When Fan Man Yi was in her early 20s, she was able to get a job as a dancer at the Empress Karaoke nightclub. She eventually fell for one of her clients, who was unfortunately another drug addict who only ended up enabling her. Despite this, they
So he pretty much started pimping her. I'm assuming.
That's a good question. It might happen.
I mean,
because
she
she
fell for
already
one of her
did do that
clients.
before, and then that's a good question. I don't know.
It's crazy, man. How like everybody is not born with the same head start. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
that's
So
for
like
sure.
you can be born to wealthy parents and you can be like totally fine in society.
Right. You
I mean,
have
people who are born to
a
wealthy
leg
parents
up,
can still end up
basically.
being like.
Well, that's
No,
true.
drug-
You do hear
no.
a lot about like a lot of those kids that end up being like drug addicts and stuff
Yeah,
too. But
but when you have like both parents and you have like wealth or
Like
even
a
middle
secure
class,
family.
yeah, more secure and stuff, you have more of a better chance of having a successful lifestyle. But when you born like poor, you born in circumstances
It's
like
so
she
much
is,
harder to get
real
through,
hard, man. Because she went from like
so many people like her get into these situations because it's like
and it's hard to get out of it.
It's like what they fell into because they didn't have,
yeah.
Once they didn't have a choice, but it's like hard to have another choice. Kind of
it's
thing.
hard to get out of it and stuff, and it's not her to blame for it. You know.
They got married in 1996.
Once the bad circumstances.
Her husband, however, soon began mistreating her. Still, though, she stayed with the man, and they actually had 2 sons together over the next couple of years. Their fighting only worsened.
I'm guessing
the neighbors would often wake up to not only the sounds of the children screaming,
yeah, because it
but
said she fell in love with her customer, but he was also a drug addict, so I don't know.
All throughout the night.
Oh my gosh.
By early
Argue all night
1997, Fun had already started
for
working
kids.
as a prostitute again out at a brothel called the Romance Villa in Kowloon. After working there for a while, she ended up meeting a 34-year-old man named Chan Man Lok. Chan was said to have been a wealthy socialite, well known throughout the area. Fan was immediately drawn to him as she was a prostitute who was addicted to drugs, and he was a drug dealer that also worked as a pimp. He would often pay her for long all-night sessions where they would binge crystal meth or ice, which he supplied.
It just sounds so dangerous.
Yeah.
It wasn't too long before Fun was integrated into Chan's inner circle. She was there along with several of his little underlings, his henchmen, if you want to call them that. Chan Man Lok was a member of the Triads, a large Chinese organized crime syndicate. He wasn't
you never heard of the Triads?
I have heard of them. I don't know a lot about them, but I've heard of them.
They're almost like your version of like the mafia, Italian mafia, or
right, okay,
mob or something like that.
One you should associate with for your own safety. However, Fun got too comfortable around him regardless. One night, during one of their binges, she stole his wallet, gaining the equivalent of about $4,000 US. That would prove to be the biggest mistake of her life. Chan found out about this and was furious.
I bet.
She agreed to pay him back with $4,000 that she was to earn from her work. He wasn't happy with this, though, and demanded $10,000 of interest.
That's a lot of
interest.
Good amount of time to pay that interest off fully.
Dang.
Chan Man Lok was furious about his stolen money. It wasn't even about the money, it was the fact that Fan even had the audacity to steal from him in the first place. In March of 1999, he got 2 of his men to kidnap Fan and take her back to his apartment on Granville Road. It was a massive apartment consisting of 5 bedrooms and was all decked out in Hello Kitty merch for some reason.
What?
Hello
That's
Kitty
just
was
creepy.
on the curtains, on the
Hello
bed
Kitty
sheets,
merch.
adorning the walls.
I mean,
and
Hello
there were
Kitty's
even
really, really
plushies all
popular
over
over
the
there, but
place.
that still is just kind
Chan
of a
planned to
creepy
kill
bedroom.
Fan
man.
and force her to
Hello
work
Kitty.
non-stop until her debt to him was fully paid off. But he was never satisfied with any amount of money she would earn. He kept increasing the interest on her debt more and more until it became impossible for her to ever pay him back.
That's just
There simply wasn't
cruel.
So pretty much she's trying
That's sick.
He's pretty much trying to like punish her. You know what I'm saying?
But this is more than punishment. This is almost like an obsession, if you ask me.
I mean, it kind of is. You know what I'm saying?
Because it's like, it's bad enough if you're like making a interest of $6,000, which is more than double what she stole, and then you're just keep increasing it, like keeping changing the goal. Like
he's pretty much
this is
saying,
just
"Look,
messed up.
I'm going to own you forever. You're
Basically,
gonna be my slave forever. There's nothing you can do
it
about it."
doesn't seem like there's, and plus, like, talk about like feeling hopeless. That like for that poor woman.
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's
I
like
bet she do feel
there's no way
hopeless.
out of it then, at that point.
Man, what? Yeah.
Because he kidnapped her, so you know he's probably got her like locked up and stuff.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's
messed up.
Weird. He just,
Yeah.
he's pissed. I can understand being pissed about like somebody stealing money from you and then you want to
Right,
like want your money
but
back for
he
interest.
kind of went psycho on it.
Psycho, and they put you in a Hello Kitty like room, like all
I
Hello
think
Kitty merch.
That alone would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Keep up with the constantly spiking increase to the debt. So, in addition to making her work even more, the gang started taking their frustrations out on her as well.
Oh,
What's
no.
that?
They began to
Like,
hit
you know.
her and strike her repeatedly very often. She would often be so bruised and battered that she couldn't even work.
Oh my gosh.
Despite this, the group would continue to get high and subject her to even more beatings.
Damn.
They enjoyed themselves far too much while doing so, often laughing at her pain. This
Yeah.
was
That's
when
just
things
sadistic.
got really out of hand. And you may be thinking it's already out of hand.
Right,
and
that's
you
what
would
I was gonna
absolutely
say.
be right, but it's about to get much, much worse.
Jesus.
The group that tortured Fan consisted of Chan Man Lok, the leader,
Damn.
Leung Wai Lung, a subordinate gangster of his who is said to have been either 19 or 21,
He looks
and Leung
like
Xing
really
young.
Cho,
Yeah.
aged 26, another one of his underlings. But there was soon one new member to that group, a 14-year-old minor named Ah
What?
Fong. She, although she had been reported to be one of the girlfriends of one of his underlings, ended up being a victim of Chan himself as he
I
groomed her
wondered.
more
Okay, I
and
thought
more
you
over
were
time.
gonna
kinda
say like she was
wondered,
being,
yeah.
she was
Girl,
like
though,
being a
despite being
woman up
very
too.
young and
Mm-hmm.
obviously manipulated, was ice cold herself. She very much enjoyed helping the group to mistreat Fan. She would even giggle and laugh hysterically while doing so. She took the opportunity to get creative and would even come up with her own ways to brutalize the woman herself.
Oh my
She was
gosh,
always
it's
ready and
14
willing to
doing
Sounds
this
join
crap.
in.
horrible, yeah.
The group, unsatisfied at the amount of money Fan was bringing in, continued to mistreat her more and more. They tied her up, punched her, and kicked her all over. They would force themselves on her repeatedly, as much as they wanted. They even forced her to eat excrement.
Ew!
They started hitting her
Crap,
with metal
dude.
bars,
Yes.
hit her.
That's
Oh my God.
disgusting. That. Oh.
So they forced her to eat doo-doo and stuff.
Yes. It sounds like they're literally doing everything to her.
They just pretty much just torturing her.
Everything. They're beating her. They're probably molesting her.
Yeah. The 14-year-old girl,
She's brainwashed. Is
she's
the
brainwashed.
problem.
I mean, she still know right from wrong. They
Yeah.
definitely brainwashing her.
They've
They
definitely
do
brainwashed
those,
her.
like, acts of terror on this woman.
It's just scary because like she's gonna be messed up the rest of her life probably.
Yeah.
No matter what.
And stabbed her with kitchen utensils,
Ew.
smashed
What?
pieces of furniture over her,
So he's trying to do
and
some
tied her up
WWE
in a
type
standing
stuff?
position to use her as a punching bag. It got to the point that one
I can't
day
believe
alone,
she's
she
still,
ended
like,
up
surviving
getting kicked
all
in the
this,
head
honestly.
about 50
That's her
times.
It
It has been said that Fan even got
Dang.
pregnant around this time, but the mistreatment
gosh.
continued regardless.
I'm sure they
When
would
she
just
was wounded,
miscarry.
barely able to even move, the group would rub spices into her open wounds.
Oh my
To
God,
further
they'll burn
ensure
like
that
crazy.
she wouldn't be running away or moving much at
Burn
all,
her
they would
feet?
burn her legs with hot candle wax repeatedly and even melt
Yeah,
plastic.
this is demonic, man.
Oh
They
my
doing
God.
her.
She was then forced to consume even more urine and
Yeah, that's demonic.
The group would then force her to smile and say that she enjoyed all of these things.
What?
If she refused, they would just mistreat her even worse, getting even harsher with their
How
punishments.
can you get harsher?
All throughout this time, Fan's husband and kids wondered where she even went. They were left with nothing to do but worry about her and hope that she would come home. The group started getting
Yeah, I'm
more and more
surprised they, like,
creative.
sit
I
on a
kind of
beach like
forgot.
that.
I kind of forgot that she had a husband
Yeah,
and two
yeah.
kids. Like I was, wow, yeah.
I'm
I mean, the
surprised they didn't call
husband
the cops,
mistreated
though.
her too. Remember, so it's
Huh.
not like the husband was beating her too.
Yeah, he
It sounded
was. He
like-
was like kind of crappy, but you think like maybe he would have like
You like
filed a report
right?
that his
Say
wife was
something.
missing.
It's a good question.
Unless she always leaves all the time or something like that,
I
and
don't
he just
know.
like, well, she's gone. She'll come back.
Well, I mean, right? Because they said they kidnapped her, so it's not like she left. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Find throughout the apartment that could possibly inflict pain, that could be used as a weapon. They would set plastic straws on fire and press them against the bottom of her feet until they were covered in painful burns and blisters.
She's looking up
They
all
would then
kinds of
hit
ways
her
to
in the
torture
feet
Probably,
with
people.
yeah.
sticks and whatever else they could find. All throughout this, they would throw chili oil onto her wounds and dump
Ugh.
oyster sauce onto her face. They then made her drink the combination of oils afterwards. It was a game they played. If she didn't pretend to be happy, then they would beat her harder.
So they want her to
told
be
her
happy
to
for
smile
being
while
Yeah.
they hurt her. It was a fun atmosphere, said Ah Fong. It
was
got
a
to the
fun
point where they
atmosphere.
started using Fan as a toilet, directly urinating
Ew.
onto her face and sometimes even
On
into
her
her
face?
mouth. If she spat any of it out, she was severely punished.
Oh my
so y'all want her to
gosh.
Once even
eat y'all
defecated
feces.
into a shoebox and
Oh,
forced
gosh.
Fan to eat it,
Oh
which
my
she thought was
gosh.
hilarious. The group started wrapping her in electrical
Things seem to
wires
be
and hanging her
other
from a
things.
hook on the ceiling.
Oh my
They would then
God.
mistreat her in any way that they wanted, usually hitting her with iron bars and leave her there overnight. Eventually, they stopped feeding her entirely.
Yeah, I'm sure she lost
The
a lot of
bodily
weight.
fluids they would subject her to became her only form of sustenance. They continued to pack her
Ew.
wounds with dirt, spices, salt, and really anything else they could find to make sure that she never
They're
felt
literally
any
just
sort of
torturing her
relief.
to death.
All
Like
over
she's
4
gonna end up
grand.
Say,
dying.
after seeing the shape she was in, potential clients started refusing her services.
Well,
meaning
yeah.
that she was no longer pulling in any money for the group.
I'm surprised she
Fan
was
would lie
able
on
to
the
still
floor,
like they
starve,
made her
Walk
do her,
out
like,
of there
Yeah,
even. Yeah.
While the group hung out and watched TV or played video games. She was broken, and playing with her wasn't so much fun after that, but we
Well, yeah,
carried
you
on
guys
anyway.
broke her.
There
Wait.
wasn't
She's
really
mentally
anything
broken.
else to do, said Ah Fong. Ah Fong would gladly participate in any of the horrible things the group did to Fun, enjoying it all the way, admittedly laughing at everything that happened to her. It was for fun, she later said.
What?
The full details of
How
what
is
Ah
this
Fong
fun
did
to
herself
you?
have never been revealed, but it's undoubtedly a very long list, even by her own admission. One night, the group decided to go out for some drinks. To make sure that Fun couldn't escape, they did what they usually did. They tied her up and threw her onto the bathroom floor, locking the door behind them. This sort of mistreatment could only go on for so long. After about a month of this, on April 15th of 1999, Fun finally succumbed to her wounds and passed away, cold, alone, and in pain while her captors were out of the house. After a few days, the group came back
Yeah,
So
to
I kind
was
of wonder
gonna
what did
say.
she
Ah
die
Fong
from?
stated that
I know
she
she
had-
was like severely beaten and stuff like that. But what was her?
I'm sure, right. It could have been any number one of it. It could have
The
been a
cause of
wound. It
death.
could have been one of the beans. It could have been starvation.
Yeah, it could
They
have
didn't
been
really say
starvation.
how long they had her either, did they? I mean,
I don't
like,
think
makes you
so.
wonder, like, how long was she subjected to all of this, too?
use the restroom. When she went into the restroom, she found Fun deceased on the floor. The men began to discuss amongst themselves.
Like what to
they
do?
needed a way to get rid of the body, but
Yeah.
they couldn't decide on which method would be best. They even argued about what likely caused her death,
What?
obliviously
How do
most
you
of
not
them
know?
believing that it was probably an overdose that did her in.
Are they
Most
that
experts
dumb?
agree, though, as you can assume, that it was more likely the actual injuries that
Yeah,
led to her
that's
death.
what it
Yeah.
So, deciding to put a pin in it for now, they decided to go to the arcade and play some video games.
Okay,
all
well we
for
see her
fun.
body. Let's go play video game.
After
Gosh,
a while,
they clearly
came
did
back
not
home, went to
care.
sleep, and did nothing about the problem.
You have a body in your bathroom.
Completely high, Chan came to a conclusion. He gathered up his little posse and told them now she must be destroyed. They put her into the bathtub and got to
gosh.
work with a handsaw.
Oh, God.
Once
Oh,
the
my
body was
gosh.
divided up into
Do you know
more
how hard that
manageable
is, too?
portions,
Sure.
they cooked each piece to prevent further decay and
They
to get
cooked
rid of
it?
some of the
Cooked her?
smell, boiling the pieces on the
Ew.
stove.
That would
Chan
smell
woke up
alone.
Ah Fong, who was sleeping, and waved a bag of guts in front of her. He told her to go put them into some hot water to stop them from smelling. Leong Xing Cho was in
So
the middle
what,
of boiling
putting
the
body
head
parts in hot
himself
water can
and
stop you
called
from
Ah
smelling?
Fong over to come
I think
and look
because you
at
just
it.
boil
She said that
all
she
of it
was
away
scared and
eventually.
didn't want to look, but he said, "It's okay, just pretend you're watching TV." She decided to give it a peek and decided that, he was right, it looked like something out of a horror movie. Given that this had already taken 10 hours, the group started getting pretty hungry.
Yeah.
How they could even
Oh,
get an
no.
appetite while all of this
Please
was
tell me
going
they
on
don't
is
eat
maybe
her.
one of the
Probably
biggest
so.
mysteries
Disgusting.
about this case, if you ask me. While boiling Fan's head in a pot, stirring it ever so often, they decided to throw some noodles onto the adjacent burner. They used
Ew.
the same spoon to stir their soup as
Ew.
they did to stir the head.
You've got to be
alternating
kidding
Yeah.
me.
By the time their meal was over, the head was now nothing but bone. They
That's
decided to take the
disgusting.
skull and sew it into the
Number
head of
bone?
one of their Hello Kitty plushies.
Yeah, because
a
they
large
just
mermaid
melted
one.
all the flesh off of her head.
This
How
is
long have you
obviously
born
where
for?
the
A
name
long
of the
time.
case comes from. It's still unknown why they even decided to go through the trouble of doing this. Given how drug-fueled the whole operation
Yeah,
was,
these
it's
people are
safe to
clearly
say
out of
that
their minds.
If there even was a reason, it might not make a lot of sense now. For unknown reasons, they decided to keep some other bits as well, namely a tooth and some organs.
Ew.
However, they
That's
disposed of the
disgusting.
rest in the apartment complex as garbage. Things were quiet for about a month. It seemed that they had gotten away with all that they had done. That all changed 1 month later in May. Ah Fong made her way out to a local police station. She
Wow.
told the police that she was being haunted by a ghost, oddly enough. She told the police that this particular ghost had
She
been tied up
goes
in electrical wire
And
and
admits
murdered.
everything.
The police, though,
Yeah.
given that this was simply a ghost story, didn't take her very seriously at all.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Brushed
why
it
would
off,
you?
assuming that she was just having nightmares or being silly. This was, however, until Ah Fong told them that she had played a part in the murder of this particular woman. This obviously changed things drastically. The police
obviously.
asked her for more details and eventually followed her out to where all the carnage took place, the apartment. This is where they discovered that her nightmares were
This is
very much
interesting. I
indeed
can't
based
believe
in
she,
reality. Inside,
actually
she
went to the
pointed them
police
to the
on
Hello
this.
Kitty mermaid
She probably was
doll.
afraid that they were going to do her
Inside,
next,
they
probably,
found
Yeah.
the skull.
sooner or later.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The whole group was found, arrested, taken in, and taken to trial. Ah Fong, which likely isn't even her real name, by the way, it's likely a pseudonym given to her by the court system.
They all did, so maybe that's what they do when they arrest people, so they're not...
She told the police that she was Chan Man Lok's girlfriend, but she was also very likely one of his prostitutes as well. When asked why they had done all of this, she simply said, "I have a feeling it was for fun."
What? Well, for them.
This case quickly became a spectacle all throughout Hong Kong. Most citizens had never heard of a case coming anywhere near this magnitude.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Being a pretty safe modern city, they couldn't imagine something so sinister going on so close by. One element of this case that fascinated them was the terrifying juxtaposition of one of the most grisly crimes they'd ever heard of meeting with one of the cutest icons they could think of. Yeah. The mixture of horror and innocence stood out to a good amount of people. The trial would go on to last for 6 months. Ah Fong went on to testify in exchange for complete immunity. In order to placate Fun's ghost and finally get some peace, she spilled all the gritty details. Every single disgusting detail of every single disturbing thing that the group did. Ugh. She said that this was in order to relieve her guilt and stop the haunting. During the trial, material evidence relating to the case was presented.
That's what she's saying, yeah.
This included the refrigerator,
even if it was just like in her dreams or something, you know, like whatever the case.
Skull itself. It has been said that the stench radiated throughout the entire courtroom.
Ugh.
Psychiatrists evaluated the 3 men, who went on to describe them to the courts as being completely remorseless.
Their sentencing is like
there was one massive roadblock to the case, though. Given the way that Fun's body ended up, there wasn't any clear, for sure reason to find out what actually happened.
Like there was nothing to like back up the story,
basically. They couldn't come up with a concrete cause of death, given the evidence that they had to go off of. It could have been from the abuse, or it could have actually been due to an overdose. As a result, the men weren't convicted of murder, but instead of manslaughter. The jury had come to believe that they had indeed caused her death, but they couldn't agree on whether or not there was intent.
Yeah.
They couldn't rule out that the men did intend to kill her, but they also couldn't rule out that they didn't.
The thing is, with a case like that, they probably didn't intend to kill her. They just want to torture her.
Right. They actually seemed oblivious to the fact that what they were doing would likely kill her.
Yeah.
Because he even said at one point that like these guys thought that she probably died from an overdose.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how could you think that when you're beating her like crazy? So I don't know.
So the intent wasn't there.
Right.
But you should also know.
But you should know that when you're when you should know when you're going that crazy that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, you torturing her, and on top of that, you're not even feeding her food. You pretty much letting her starve. So you should know what's going to happen.
I think a large part of the problem in this situation is that the people that were doing the act were also out of their minds on drugs.
Yeah, they was.
So they weren't thinking coherently. So clearly they weren't thinking about the fact that obviously we're going to kill her because we're not feeding her and we're beating her to death. Like, a normal person would think about that, but they did not, clearly.
But, still, I don't know.
Craziness.
Just manslaughter.
And the fact that they had no remorse for it.
No, they didn't. So they still should have got, like, manslaughter charges and kidnapping.
Right.
And,
but I don't know how it works in China.
Yeah, I don't know how it works.
You can double up here, but I don't know if you can there.
Yeah.
Sure. Despite all of the doubts and the charges being reduced to manslaughter, the court justice, Peter Nguyen, was having none of it. In December of 2000, he sentenced the 3 to life in prison.
Okay.
Sadly enough, though, this sentence did come with the possibility of parole. It wouldn't be for 20 years, though. Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness.
Yeah, that was all of it.
The public is entitled to protection from people such as you.
That is very true.
While if this had taken place in mainland China, all 3 would have likely been executed pretty swiftly.
Because Hong Kong
death penalty.
Okay.
Han's husband came out and spoke of the sentencing.
Yeah.
It seems that he was satisfied with them getting life in prison. He did, though, end by saying, "But how can I ever forget?" Ah Fong was released, free of charges, into foster care. It's currently unknown where she is now
so she
or
would have
how
been
she
really
turned
young
out.
at that time.
Yeah.
The lawyers of the 3 men tried to appeal the case in 2003, but they had no luck. The sentence was upheld.
So they lucky
Those
they have
3
China
monsters
are
weren't going anywhere.
That's what's interesting. They said
In
mainland China, so I didn't realize that Hong Kong had
Fun's skull, the only remaining evidence
kind
of
of
her body,
separate government governance than China. I mean, maybe they don't, but they do somehow.
Maybe it's
I don't
like
know.
more
out there's
territory.
gonna have to explain that because
It's like Hong Kong, like a territory of China.
I don't know. That's a good question. I really don't know. I thought it was a major city in China.
Yeah,
but it sounds like they have slightly different laws. I don't know if that's just because. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody can tell us.
Yeah, let us know if it's like Hong Kong their own government or is they a territory of China or something like that.
Right.
But they got their own laws, so it's like they got to be,
or at least slightly different laws.
Yeah.
Somehow, I don't know.
Over to her family, who had it cremated. The apartment building, located at 31 Granville
No one's gonna
Road,
wanna live there.
Sangsha-tsui, Hong Kong, where the murder took place, was eventually demolished entirely in September of 2012. After several years, in 2016, it was rebuilt as a hotel that still exists to this day. The actual location where the murder took place is now, by some dark irony, a restaurant. 20 years came and went, and in 2020 it seems that the trio never did get their parole, as there's no news out there of their release. That is, except for one of the men. The Yongxing Cho was actually released in April of 2014.
What?
It seems that his lawyer was able to appeal and convince the courts that there wasn't sufficient evidence against him. As you might assume, it wasn't too long before he was on the police's radar again. Just recently, in January of 2022, while he was working as a waiter, he groped the chest of a female minor.
Oh my god.
What?
And
10?
more recently, he was sentenced to
Why
12 months in prison for that.
Break the chest of a 10-year-old?
So as of the writing of this video, he is back in prison.
Because he's clearly
Time
a sick
will tell
individual.
if they end up seeing parole in the future. There ended up being a few movies released throughout the years that told the story of this case. One of them was called Human Pork Chop with, my god, have some tact, come on. Another was called
That sounds
There's a
horrible.
Secret in My Soup. This case even became well enough known overseas that it was featured in an episode of Bones, an American crime drama.
I
To
watched
this
some
very
Bones,
day,
but not all
Fan
of them.
Man-yi's memory is kept alive every year when citizens of Hong Kong celebrate her life on her birthday with a candlelight vigil in the center of the
That's
city.
nice.
Yeah, man. She had a rough.
She had it really rough.
Really rough in life, man. So.
I mean, and I've heard of a lot of sick and twisted murder stories and crazy things.
Yeah.
This one's pretty bad.
Let me start off by saying this case is very dark. More so
I feel like he says that about every case,
This
though.
is somewhat of a sequel to
Yeah.
Every case gonna be dark.
He says every case is very
The
dark.
cases were pretty often compared in the Japanese media, and I think you'll see why later on. Given that, I just want to give out a little warning. This one gets bad, too. If you have a hard time stomaching this sort of thing, just feel free to click off to another video.
Well, crime
But
is like
if
different in
you're
other
prepared,
countries, but
Yeah.
how some people in other countries do
Fusako
really
Sano had
sadistic
been
stuff.
kidnapped
I mean,
by a
it's
very
crazy,
mentally
like
ill
murderers
man
in
named
America
Nobuo
as well.
No, there are definitely been a lot of
then
serial
28
killers.
years old and unemployed. Sato was born in 1962 to a father who was a chauffeur to a wealthy client at a big company in Tokyo during the post-war era. That father had 5 kids with another mother, but ended up outliving her and then married Sato's mother afterwards.
Oh, okay.
His father was 62 while his mother was 36.
That's quite an
His
age
father had built
difference.
a new home
Huge
for
age
Sato and his mother, which included a large Western-style room on the second floor, which was to be his nursery. Unfortunately, this cozy room for one child would end up being a complete living hell for another. Sato, when getting into middle school, eventually told his mother that he was too scared to go to school. He was taken to a mental health facility and diagnosed as having germophobia, among other things.
Oh, damn. So he's got a
His
germ.
phobia got so
Like being around
intense that he
people.
would threaten to disown his father if he ever came home with the slightest amount of dirt on him.
Oh my
In high
gosh.
So his
school,
dad put
although
it in
being
him.
quite
His
tall
mom.
and somewhat intimidating, he was very soft-spoken, often being...
The kid had germophobia, and then he said he would threaten his dad if his
Oh,
dad
okay.
came home with any dirt on him.
Damn, why you gonna throw your dad for, man?
Right, because he was
dang.
such a germaphobe, so it like scared him enough that he
Yeah.
was like, I don't know.
I never met a germaphobe before.
No, I mean not like true germophobia. Like
Yeah.
I think we know people who like
They like to clean
tend to
things
be
up.
more like
but yeah.
no, but like more like nervous about germs.
Yeah.
but not like true germophobic.
So I kind of wonder, what do we do? Just stay in this room and make sure
I don't
everything's
know.
clean?
That's gonna be a
do we
good
wear a mask?
question.
I mean, it's one of
Like,
those things
You
like
can't touch anything in public. Probably.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
it's like that's a horrible way to live your life.
Yeah.
But I guess some germaphobes just make it work. I guess.
Right.
Called an Okama by the other kids. which is a word that basically translates as a slur against gay or trans people. He withdrew into himself and took his anger home with him, often venting and taking his frustrations out on his family. Afterwards, he went to go work at an automobile parts factory, but his eccentricities often got him into trouble. There was a public urination case, for one, and another time he retreated back home on his way to work, his excuse being that he got caught in a spider web. So eventually he left that job and stopped working.
That is a weird one.
It's safe to say that by this point in his life, he was already pretty gone.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of like
it. At age 19, he got into an argument with his mother,
he did.
claiming he was leaving home for good. He set fire to a Buddhist altar in the home, which spiraled out of control into a huge house fire.
Oh my gosh,
he was taken in for another mental examination, and it was determined that he had a severe case of OCD. After about a month of intense medication and supervision, he was released. After that point, he spent most of his time betting on horse races and obsessing over
I don't remember what year it was now.
Eventually, he told his mother that it was time he started becoming independent and expressed his interest in building an addition onto their house. She complied, and a new room was added to the second floor.
So they just built it.
Him somewhat of his own apartment up there. But the room was given up on mid-construction. Sato kept fussing over the construction crew bringing germs into the home, and he also failed to keep
That's why they left. That's why they quit, probably.
Including looking for a job.
Oh gosh.
It was at this point that Sato went from being a regular piece of shit to a criminal.
Dang.
Piece of shit.
A criminal, regular to
criminal. In 1989, he ended up waiting outside of an
1989,
elementary school gate and shadowing 4 young girls as they walked out of the
Creeper.
school.
Basically being a creeper.
He ended up tailing one until she came close to a vacant lot, when he then dragged her into said lot and attempted to have his way with her.
Oh no.
However, another girl ended up witnessing him taking her off into the lot and ran off to tell some older
So he
students.
didn't get away with anything.
An office worker from the school then showed up and captured Sato. The police were called, and he was arrested on charges of an attempted indecent act.
Oh gosh, just an attempted
2
one.
months
Well, I guess
after
if he
this, his father would
didn't
pass
go through
away,
with it.
likely in complete shame over what his son had become. In that September, he was sentenced to a 1-year suspended sentence as a result. The court decided that his chances of reoffending were low, and in lieu of probation, decided to release him to his mother's custody, on the condition that she look after him and guide him. And as we know, this didn't work out.
I mean, at least she was seeking help for
still
him.
Right.
Because some people don't even, they just deny it and don't do anything.
On November 13th of
Well, she wasn't putting him in therapy. She was putting him more in...
like the hospital?
The hospital.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same thing, but I get what you're saying. Like, it's not actual, like, long... Like, after he gets out, then is he still getting therapy?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
It's like he goes in there and then, boom.
They treat him and then it's like, okay, you're good.
Okay, you're good. And then go back and then he do the same old crap all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, this didn't work out. While still on his suspended sentence, Sato took his mother's car and went out for a drive on November 13th of 1990. He drove around for a couple of hours until he ended up spotting a young girl that piqued his interest, Fusako Sano, at around 5 p.m. It was unplanned, as far as we know. Upon seeing the little girl walking around by herself, he made the decision to kidnap her. He parked the car in front of her and got out, brandishing a knife, making his way closer to her. He told her, "Be good and don't say a word." Sano was too scared to move, so Sato was able to pick her up and throw her into the trunk of the car.
If she was 9, she probably wasn't
until he stopped on the side of the road, where he got out and ran to the back of the car. He opened the trunk and bound Sano's hands with tape and covered her eyes as well. He once again closed the trunk and set off towards his house, arriving home at around 6:30 p.m. So that his mom wouldn't spot him hauling a 9-year-old into the house, he decided to enter the home through an entrance to the unfinished addition to the house. Then he went back around to the front door by himself and entered the home as normal, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. He went up to Sano, locked up in the old nursery, and removed her blindfold. He told her, "You don't want to end up killed like all those other kidnapped girls, do you?
Oh my God.
You're never going to leave this room. You're going to live in here forever. If you break this promise, I won't need you anymore.
Some of these people
I'll bury you in the mountains or send you floating away in the ocean," he added. From here on, her confinement would continue for years and years and years. When Sano didn't come home that night, her mother went to a police substation and begged them to search for her.
Yeah,
sure they did. You're right. She's 9 years old and she's missing.
Getting as large as 200 people, and they set out to search for any clues as to her whereabouts. They searched everywhere, from vacant homes to shipping containers, even using helicopters to search for the girl. Over 20,000 missing posters were drafted up and passed around.
Damn.
But no clues were ever found.
Oh my gosh.
Sato continued to threaten Sano repeatedly during her confinement. He would often swing his knife around her, injuring her dozens of times in the process. In the beginning, he would bind her up so tightly that she couldn't move whenever he went to bed for the night. Her legs were bound tightly together for over a year straight.
That sounds so
To make it even
uncomfortable.
more
Yeah.
difficult
You
for
just
her
tied
to
up, like,
escape, Sato
bound
kept
together.
the layout
Yeah.
of the room a secret to her. Whenever he would leave the room, he would either blindfold her or tie her up and throw her under a blanket on the bed. After about a year or two, Sato got more violent in his torture of Sano. He started using a stun gun to deal out his sick punishments,
Oh,
threatening
snap.
to stab
Just
her
shocking
if
her.
she let out her voice while being shocked. She
Oh
often
my
had to bite down
gosh.
on a blanket to refrain from screaming as she got
Yeah,
stunned.
because I mean, that's
He would
not
also
going to be
attempt to throw
like that would
wrestling
hurt.
moves on
How
her
could
as
you
well,
not?
again
Yes.
punishing her if she let her voice slip. It's
Oh my
believed that he
gosh.
hit her lightly during the duration of her captivity over 700 times, and that he hit her with considerable strength around 300 times. She would get hit in the eyes so hard that she would lose her sight from time to time.
Oh.
Eventually, she started using the stun gun on herself, hoping to be able to get used to the sensation so that it wouldn't bother her anymore.
Oh my
Yeah, but
gosh.
She developed
guessing-
an
Can you get
associative-
used? I mean,
I guess you can
could.
build up tolerance
Probably
for that type of pain.
but still, like
It's like, why she... Okay, if she had... That means she had the stun gun. Why she just didn't use it on him?
that's a good point.
You
Well,
know?
because at this point, I feel like
Well,
a
she
couple
could
things
be-
here. She was taken so young.
Yeah, you're right.
So young, so it's really easy to just
To manipulate them at that age.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is,
and
you're right.
after several years of this, you probably think that there is no escape and there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do. And then you start getting like the Stockholm syndrome, right? Where you're like,
You think this person is here to protect you.
exactly.
And you
So
become,
I mean, we can't say for sure that's the case, but any
come
of those things could have
She probably
happened.
came attached to him.
Yeah,
You
in a
know,
weird
in a
way.
non-healthy way because she
Exactly.
think like, well, this is the only person I
She
have.
was so young when
and
they took her.
when he was beating on her, she was probably thinking like, I deserved it or something. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? It just
Anything
like,
is possible in these situations for
yeah.
mechanism, meaning she began feeling that another person was the one being hit, not
Oh.
her, allowing her to kind of distance herself from the pain inside her mind. Sano was initially, obviously, terrified, but this fear soon waned as she began to give up and accept her fate. Sato would bring clothes to her for her to wear, usually
Yeah, I
his
wonder
own,
how old
and
he was.
initially
Then when he,
fed her 3
like,
times
first
a day.
kidnapped her.
It was
Yeah.
either
Didn't really
food that he
say.
brought by himself or food that was cooked by his mother, who was still living on the first floor.
Yeah, and she
For
obviously
some
had no
reason,
clue.
Sato
Yeah,
began
no clue.
fearing that Sano might be developing diabetes because of a bruise on her leg, likely caused by him.
Yeah,
He
probably
decided that
repeating
she
her.
was getting too much sugar and began limiting her meals to once a day. She went from weighing 46 kilograms to 38 kilograms and began feeling very faint most of the
Okay,
time.
I don't know how much that is.
Usually
because-
spending
I
most
think
of it
as an
it's
American.
2.2 kilograms per pound, or about that,
So she was 101 pounds, and she went from 101,
to 83.
to 83 pounds.
That's pretty drastic when you're only 100 pounds.
Yeah, and I'm guessing
And
like,
remember,
did it say?
we have to remember she was 9.
Yeah, did it
when
say
she
2
first-
years went by? I think 2 years went by, something like that.
Yeah, at least, because I don't know, his story has kind of changed a little bit. Because at one point he said after 2 years he started getting more. So I don't know if
Yeah,
it's only
so
been
she
2
could have
years
been
or more.
Well, if she's 11 years old, then that is low for somebody that's 11.
Probably, I would think,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, it is. That is low.
time lying down. Eventually, her legs withered to the point of being unable to walk
Yeah, you
around
wouldn't
on her
have,
own
you'd
anymore.
atrophy.
Oh my, yeah,
She
bad.
needed to build strength in her legs, but Sato wouldn't allow this, as that
Ugh.
might end up with her exposing
It'd be hard
herself
for her
to
to probably
his
walk
mother.
too.
Bro, yeah, you
There
wouldn't
was
be able
no
to
toilet
if you're
on the
forced to lay
second
down all
floor
the
of the
time.
home, and Sato, obsessing over cleanliness in an odd
Yeah,
way,
how did he
didn't
deal with
use
that?
The toilet, instead using plastic bags, which
Ew.
he would then seal and put out into the hallway.
That's worse.
He was
Yeah.
embarrassed of this, so he forbid Sano to see the hallway, blindfolding her if it were ever necessary to go out there. One day, after being severely weakened, Sano fell out of bed, injuring her already weakened body. Nevertheless, she was forced to crawl down the stairs and into the shower herself while still blindfolded.
Where's the mom?
The mother of Sato consulted the public health center in January 1996 because Sato had been acting strangely and had become very violent towards her. However, nothing was really done about it. Sato's mother, despite living downstairs, is reported to have had absolutely no contact with Sano whatsoever over the years.
That's crazy. Like,
Sato
she
just completely ignored
him.
him.
Never attempted to go upstairs, leading to her never even trying to go up there.
Of course he would.
Many people, however, including the police, speculate that she must have had some knowledge that another person was up there.
She had to have
It's
had
alleged
something.
that she bought feminine hygiene products for Sato, for example. Sato would cut Sano's hair by himself, often into short, choppy cuts. There was no bath on the second floor of the home, so Sano was only allowed to bathe once in a while, with permission and while being watched by her captor. She lived a very boring life while not being directly harmed by Sato.
She was only able to bathe every once in a while. For a guy that's a germaphobe, you think he'd be trying to
That's
bathe
what I'm saying.
more.
Like, it's not really ringing
Later
true
on
to his
in her
germophobia in
captivity,
a way.
She was allowed to watch
ways.
TV from time to time. Sato would also talk to her about topics that interested him, providing the most mild of entertainment. The door to the apartment was never locked.
She was like a weird companion
but
to him.
despite this, Sano never attempted to even take one step outside in all of those years. At first, it was because she was too scared, but eventually it was because she lost all the willpower and energy to even try.
Well, if
Throughout
she
her
was so weak,
confinement,
it's like,
Sano
how
had
could you
very
even
little
leave?
exposure to
How
the
far was she
outside
actually
world
getting?
outside of TV and radio. She never developed mentally past her 9-year-old state. It was later found that she had a very noticeably low intelligence level when compared to peers of her own age. Sato stated that he saw Sano as a friend throughout her captivity, and claimed that he gave her everything she needed to develop normally. By this point in her captivity, she started obeying my orders very well. I thought that I'd like to live with her forever. We could talk on equal footing about horse races and cars.
Well, this is probably what he genuinely thought.
It felt
like he really thought that.
My own age.
Yeah.
She was an irreplaceable partner to me, so I could never let her go, Sato said.
And his weird
Sato's mother was so afraid of his violent outbursts that she tried to work as much
his
as
psyche,
possible.
he really thought that this was like
his partner,
a friend that he could talk to, but he was just talking to her. She wasn't like probably able to share in these conversations.
No, she couldn't. And on top of that, she's been with him for like 2-3 years, so she didn't really develop. Well, her
it's
mind
probably longer than that by now.
Well, her mind didn't really develop, so she still has the brain of a 9-year-old kid.
Right, but that's what's weird though, because he said it's like a girl my own age, and he's clearly older.
He's clearly a lot older.
So but as we know, he has his own mental issues, so he's not clearly like totally with it in this situation.
I kind of want to see how this is gonna go. Like, will a guy like this do time, or
good question,
or would he go to like a psych ward because like it is something wrong with him mentally?
The difference in this case, I mean, he's beaten her, but they never said anything about molesting her. So
he's not doing none of that. He just and it says he hit her like 700 times light, and then 300 times he hit her real
so
hard.
It's not as gruesome as some of the ones we've heard, but still horrible. Yeah.
Ready?
She began killing time outside the house as much as possible to avoid going home. By 1999, Sato began using the stun gun on his mother as well.
Oh, what?
Along with punching her and kicking her, he began tying her up as well.
So he started doing it to his mom?
To the bathroom,
this guy's sick.
according to the mother.
Oh, jeez.
The mother called to get mental help for her son on January 12th of 2000. And basically getting nothing out of it, she then tried calling again on January 19th, begging for an official to come visit the home. They finally complied, and some healthcare officials finally did visit the home that Friday on the 28th. Healthcare workers approached Sato and told him that he was going to be taken in for a mental health evaluation. This resulted in an enormous violent outburst that did nothing but further prove the
Life's gonna
point.
get crazy, real crazy.
Subsequently, the police were called to the scene.
It
was during the commotion that everyone noticed a lump under a blanket moving around in his room. When removing the blanket, they were shocked to reveal a sickly pale, short-haired girl underneath. They asked her who she was. She simply told them, "I need to get my thoughts in order." They called Sato's mother into the room and asked who the hell this girl was. She responded, "I don't know, I've never seen her before." They then informed the girl that Sato was likely going to be going away for a long time and asked what she wanted to do, likely thinking that she could have possibly been his girlfriend. Sano looked toward the mother and asked, "Is it okay if I stay here?" The officials urged her to call her own home. She responded, "My home might not be around anymore." The mother asked where her home was. Sano responded, "Maybe here."
Yeah, she doesn't even know at this point. It's been so long.
Sano was taken away to a mental facility, and his mother was taken to a separate hospital. They urged her to please give them her identity, saying they could work to find her family.
Does she remember her name?
Yeah, she probably won't remember.
She finally complied. The police were shocked to find that she had been the young girl that went missing almost a decade prior.
Jeez.
Sano told the officials, "I was abducted near the school by a man who forced me into a car.
Okay, at least you
For
remember
9
that.
years, I did not take a step out of the house.
Oh my gosh.
Today, I went out for the first time."
Damn.
Upon her medical examination after being rescued, Sano was found to be relatively healthy given the circumstances.
That's really surprising because she hadn't had no vitamin D or
Skinny
nothing.
into the
Well, she was
lack of
weak. She was still
exercise.
getting one meal
She
a
could
day.
barely walk. Her leg muscles had atrophied so
Right.
badly.
She just was weak
She
and
was
not
also
very
fairly
muscular.
dehydrated
But
as well. Due to a complete lack of exposure to sunlight, she was extremely pale and
Yeah,
no
suffered
vitamin
from
D.
jaundice. While she had the body of an emaciated 19-year-old, she was mentally on par with a child.
Yeah.
oh, man.
Understandably, she also had a pretty severe case of PTSD.
Oh, of course.
Bad.
Soon
How could
after
you
the
not?
police were
I
finally
don't know
able
if
to
therapy
get in
gonna really be
contact
able to
with
help
Yeah.
her.
Well,
she
Maybe.
was finally
over time,
reunited with
It'll take a
hopefully,
long
you,
time.
yeah.
almost 10 years. Her own mother didn't even recognize her at first,
my
given that she
gosh.
hadn't seen her since
Well,
she was
that's a
9
huge
years
change.
old.
From 9 to 19.
Nobuyuki Sato, now 37 years old, was hospitalized that very day, being deemed mentally unstable. Within a month,
yeah.
his status was formally changed
So he was
from
18 years older
suspect
than
to
her.
criminal, and
she
he
was
was
19, she
finally
had
arrested
37.
on February
Yeah.
11th of 2000.
What? No, 19
Yeah, 'cause
years.
he's saying
Sato's
she-
mother was
yeah.
heavily criticized around the time of his arrest. Given that the Junko Furuta case from 1989 was still at this time fresh on the minds of the populace, people couldn't help but make connections. In both cases, a young girl was held captive on the second floor of a home while the parents lived on the first floor. In the Junko Furuta case, the parents knew very well that a girl was being
they're
held
being
upstairs
tortured
and
upstairs.
Yeah,
chosen.
that made it even worse.
Could
Yes.
that have been the same in this case? People were eager to find the answer to that
I mean, I do
question.
feel like in both situations,
The
the
mother
parents were
defended
scared
herself,
of
Yeah.
repercussions.
I didn't know of the captivity, and I haven't set
She-
foot on the second
She was
floor.
trying to
Right,
help him,
she
but
clearly
To
says
be
she doesn't
fair,
know.
absolutely none
Well,
of the
right,
mother's
she at least turned
fingerprints
her
were
son
found
in
on
when
the
she
second
could.
floor.
Yeah.
Like, tried to
Sano
before,
herself
too.
confirmed that she knew of the mother's existence, but that was about it.
so
The mother was
girl,
left as
Santo, I
merely
mean,
a witness.
She knew of her,
Yeah.
but they clearly had never seen each other. Or
After Sano was
obviously
rescued, the police
interacted.
in Japan started facing some heavy criticism. Mainly
Yeah.
given that Sato had already attempted to kidnap another young girl in the same
Oh,
fashion, and
he
he
had?
was simply let go. And oddly enough, his name
Yeah,
had
'cause earlier he
disappeared
tried to
from
do it,
their internal list
know.
of criminals, so he
And somebody
was
reported
never
him?
even
Oh, that's
considered
right,
a
yeah.
suspect in Sano's disappearance in the first place, despite fitting the bill pretty perfectly and being in that very area. When Sano was rescued, the Niigata Prefectural Police Chief, a man named Koji Kobayashi, didn't even show up to the police station to check up on the investigation.
Dang.
Instead, he spent his night playing mahjong with the head of the Regional Police Bureau. After word of this got out, along with a slew of errors made by the police in the coming weeks, Kobayashi formally resigned from his
I'm sure he
position on
did.
February
Yeah.
26th that year. The head of the Regional Police Bureau also ended up resigning a few days later on the 29th. The media began publishing pictures of Sano and her family, which was deemed as a human rights violation by the police and heavily criticized.
What?
The anonymity of all involved in this case was quickly lost as this case became a media storm. One side
Sounds
would
like it
often
was.
argue that
Yeah.
Sano never tried to escape and that something was fishy. The other side argued that
No,
she was
because-
convinced that she would be killed if she tried to
Exactly.
escape.
Like, she was so
naturally
young.
she
Yeah,
and she was
9
so
years old.
scared.
It's pretty sick that this was an argument in the first place.
Right. Like, why are you blaming
Sato's
the
trial
capture?
began
Like
a few
the
months
that's crazy
later
when
on
people
like
February
blame the
3rd,
victim.
Yeah.
2000. The prosecutors walked on eggshells throughout the case, trying not to damage Sano's already fragile mental health throughout the proceedings.
Right.
Sato claimed
Why are you
insanity,
protecting him?
Yeah.
which some psychiatrists held
Like
some
he's the
tests to
victim or something.
determine if that was truly the case. They found that he was at least mentally fit to face his charges, and he himself ended up admitting to them. Sato was facing 10 years in prison, the maximum penalty for abduction. Ironically, not really any longer than he had held Sano captive.
It is crazy to think about that.
Prosecutors, along with virtually everyone else, felt that this sentencing was pretty light given the circumstances.
Does feel kind of light.
To boost the sentence
like,
a
you
little
definitely
bit,
ruined this poor girl's life.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
should never be
this
the same
even
again.
included charges for one time that Sato had shoplifted someone's underwear. Really just anything to get that year total up. Sato, now 40, was finally found guilty. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison due to a combination of charges including abduction,
that's better, I guess.
Theft. His defense soon appealed on January 24th in 2002, and the trial ended up moving up to the Tokyo High Court. Unfortunately, on December 10th, the High Court actually decided to reduce Sato's sentence down to 11 years. Wow. They said that the ruling by the district court was technically done wrong. It ruled that his charges should be dealt with individually, not lumped together. So he would serve the maximum 10 years for the abduction charge and 1 additional year for the theft charges. Sato was then sent off to Chiba prison, which is, not surprisingly, in the Chiba prefecture. Sano's father ended up breaking his silence and releasing a statement after the High Court ruling, saying that no matter what they decided upon, there was only anger and regret left for their family.
Maybe it was
nothing was going to change that their
not
family was deprived of happiness and a regular home life. There was no way to regain
her father.
Years,
my
2
bad.
months and 15 days.
Yeah,
of my
I get a name
life during which
yeah, sorry, that was my fault.
Joy, happiness, pain, or sadness as one normally would.
No,
he said. Fortunately, he was able to add that his daughter had gradually come to live a peaceful, relatively normal life, and that she would often spend her days watching soccer matches or taking photos of flowers in the garden with a digital camera. She was also able to get her driver's license and attend her coming-of-age
so she's starting to become normal?
She turned 20.
Sounds like
Although more than 3 years
but
had
it would
passed
take a lot of work
she had been saved by that point, she was still receiving counseling from a team of medical doctors appointed by the prefecture between 2 to 4 times a month. In 2003, during Sato's prison stay, his mother passed away at an old folks' home. The same as his father, likely in shame. In the coming years after she was released, Sano dealt with more hardship as her father drowned in a pond right in front of her eyes.
Oh my gosh!
Swinging for fun. Naturally, she was devastated, but at least for a time, the two were able to
add to your PTSD.
Yeah.
Mostly due to the outrage surrounding this case, the punishment for criminal confinement was increased from 10 years to 15 years.
Oh, okay.
In April of 2015,
so now, if it happened,
Sato
he
was
would be
able
able
to
to
get
15
released from prison. He chose not to go back to Niigata and instead chose to remain in Chiba, where his prison was. He lived alone in a small apartment and mainly lived off of welfare for the disabled. 2 years later, in 2017, it was noticed that Sato failed to show up to work one day. Police went out to his place, and he was found dead, all alone in his tiny apartment in Chiba City. He was in his mid-50s at the time. An autopsy was performed, but the cause of his death wasn't found.
That's interesting.
Fusako Sano attempted to return to
somebody take him out.
Her physical health improved
Makes you wonder,
greatly,
for sure.
and she was finally able to move around normally. She helps out in her family's rice paddy out in the countryside. Due to her stunted social development, she has a hard time socializing.
Yeah.
She doesn't have new friends
that
and
would
often spends her time
make
alone.
complete sense.
But she keeps busy with her photography hobby and her love of soccer and attends games pretty often. Her family continues to refuse to comment on the ordeal.
I don't really blame them.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, well, luckily she got a lot of help and she's trying to live a normal life. Because I didn't think like she was gonna be able to live a normal life. I thought she was gonna be just forever just screwed up for the rest of her life. But she's trying. She's doing better.
Sad to say that this is like the nicer of the cases that we've seen on this channel.
Still not nice, but
I was gonna say the better. I don't know how to say it because
she had a happy
good,
ending. I mean, she had a better ending.
She survived.
Yeah, she had a better ending,
and she's hopefully having some good quality of life. But whew, that's I can't imagine having to go through that for 10 years.
I mean, Santos was something was mentally wrong with him. He had problems.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So like compared to other guys who were just cold blooded,
they were
like,
just cold blooded,
horrible,
maniacal. It seemed like this guy really had some mental disorder. I think.
Yeah, and his mom did try to help him, so I give her that.
Yeah, but
so.
still,
but
it seems like more could have been done. He'd been in a mental hospital more than once.
Yeah,
it seems like it could have been prevented for sure.